Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Black Lightning. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We're basically picking up in the aftermath of everything with the Pierce family. Obviously, with Jeff going up against Ishmael without his powers. Obviously, he's still got his training, so he's going toe-to-toe, but obviously, it'd be a lot easier if he had his powers and everything. To be fair, I think it's also a thing of Ishmael is also prepared for your abilities, kind of done enough research on you, so it is kind of like still in Ishmael's favor, but luckily, like, you know, the tech in the suit still works as well, so it's like that's not tied to his powers. So Gamby's able to, well, it is tied to his powers that he needs his powers to activate these certain features, but Gamby's able to activate like the stealth remotely. The police show up, but their weapons are nothing because Ishmael's got like that shield and everything. It's prepared for like Jeff's powers, so I guess it kind of works in the same principle, considering it's like, well, his powers are energy based and like these weapons are energy based. So the cops ended up getting out of there because Jeff kind of told them to kind of back away, and luckily also show you, like, despite everything, Jeff didn't let Ishmael get to him. It's like, oh, I thought Black Lightning's supposed to be badass, you're just a coward. It's like, yeah, under these circumstances, it's like, something's wrong here. The fact of the matter is, why stay and fight for something like, I'm not about to be drawn, you know, and maybe that's supposed to also show maybe, like, you know, the wisdom of age of being like, nah, I'm not, no matter what you're going to say to me, I'm not going to let you draw me into something where I'm at the disadvantage. So, like, I recognize that I'm a Belle. Jennifer's falling to her death, but luckily she's able to stop herself because, like, Gamby put in a bubble. He talks about, well, like, it's like a bubble force field or whatever, and he talks about it later on that he put that in place because Jeff going unconscious and falling from the ionosphere kind of, you know, it's like, well, he put this in just in case, and it's like, well, that's a good thing he did. As for Anissa, luckily, I was like, oh, maybe her suit's going to kick in, but it's like, nope. Luckily, well, because her suit doesn't work the same way Jeff and Jennifer's does, because it didn't even click in my head until until they bring it up. It's like, right, their suits are like nanotech, but it's like activated by their powers. So it's like, without their powers, how did they take them off? He was able to kind of remotely like take them off because he was able to kind of create like a surge to like replicate like their power, so he was able to deactivate the suits. But it's like Anissa's powers don't work the same. What hers are energy based, like theirs are, like through like energy and lightning. So like she always puts her suit on like a regular suit. So that was also a thing, an aspect to it. I was like, right. So like she didn't even have her suit on at the time, so she was just trying to naturally use her powers. Like, I'm curious if she did have the suit on, and like obviously if she was able to use her powers at first, would that, because the suit kind of replicates her powers for, you know, like, I'm still not 100% clear on how that new suit works, like whether it automatically activates her power, like, because it keeps it recorded, like, okay, this is what she did, now like she's out of breath, but the suit's recording, like, okay, like it keeps her powers active even when she doesn't have them active. So would it have worked under those circumstances, considering she didn't have her powers? Like, maybe she had clicked into him before the emitter went off, and then the suit was on, maybe. Whatever the case may be, it's well, we don't have to worry about it thing, because Grace was luckily there, but obviously she's affected as well. They go in, they find the drive that Darius had hidden, eventually give it to TC, but it's like, well, TC's like, I got someone who can help me, but it's like, because I don't have my powers, so. And obviously, like, you know, you have Gamby scrambling because he's trying to figure out, like, how, okay, what's going on here? Why is everything going wrong? Then, you know, you have Jeff finding out about the Lynn situation. He had to find out about it because Shakur calls him up and is like, yo, like, basically the entire town of Freeland's turned against you because your legacy's basically in the garbage now. But the fact of the matter is, Henderson believed in you, so I'm going to believe in you too, so. And obviously, Jeff gets there and finds out about, like, obviously this all being Tobias. It seems that basically Tobias was taking everything that she did when she was with the ASA, or at least working with them, and it's like, oh, experimenting on children and stuff. Like, it's like, it seems like he's kind of, like, basically because they bring it up later on being like, oh, bogus charges. Is like, well, technically a lot of that is, like, stuff she did with the ASA to a certain extent, I guess. But it's also like, that's a gray area. Like, but I was like, it's not complete BS. It's kind of like she kind of did some of that stuff to a certain extent. Like I said, because she was, you know, kind of forced to work with the ASA, so it also doesn't count in that regard. But then like this lawyer shows up, but like Jeff is like, yeah, I can't pay for you, but it's like, don't worry, Lynn, we got this covered and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, cool, he appreciates it. But then we kind of find out like, oh, and this is the one that set that up, and it's like, wait, what? And it's like, Dad, we didn't have time to like wait around. Like you could, like you getting a public defender, Mom needs someone really good, and it's like the money necessary for this. It's because he was like, we can't afford it. It's like, I got this. It's like, right. And she's like, I know you don't like where I get my money from, like my side income, but the fact this ain't a circumstance where we need to be like, very like letting our morals get in the way. But it does leave everyone a little conflicted, because like obviously it's like the moment like it's like, oh hey, and just like he was able to get Lynn released, and Lynn's like, oh, you're able to make me smile in the most terrible situation. You're like, oh yikes. I'm like, and especially because Jeff's not as receptive. He's like, yeah, thanks. And she's like, you're a little ungrateful, aren't you? He's like, I told the dude thanks. What more do you want? And so even Jennifer calls it out, be like, I kind of did that behind Dad's back. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's like getting Mom's ex-boyfriend to help. It's like, it's just like, I didn't conspire or anything. It's like, well, Dad might not see it that way. It is a thing of like, it's going to make you feel a way. Because it's like, right. It's like, oh, college buddy and everything. I heard everything about you, and finding out like, oh, there's something more to it. That's going to rub you the wrong way, especially under these circumstances. Because for one, Jeff and Lynn, relationship-wise, ain't in the best place. So like, this is just going to be a little bit of just a little bit more of a crack on that relationship, So, and also Jeff's not feeling the most like, he says like, later on Lynn's like, why are you acting like this? And so he's like, what? She's like, ungrateful. It's like, no, I'm fine. It's like, nothing's wrong. She's like, but for him, it's like that the fact is that you don't trust me to fix this. Like that. The fact is that, like, he feels powerless, that he automatically feels powerless to help his family, because it's like, well, as Jefferson Pierce, he can't do anything because, once again, his reputation's in the dumpster. Plus, doesn't have his power, so he can't do anything as Black Lightning either. Like, it's just kind of a blow against, I think it's that thing of, like, I'm supposed to be the head of the family. I'm supposed to be able to protect this family, and he feels like he's coming up short. To be fair, kind of what Tobias wanted. He wanted to basically not just destroy you, he wanted to destroy every aspect of your life, and he's kind of doing that. So once again, it's just putting a bigger strain in a relationship. It's just interesting that like Anissa can't see that, but like Jennifer's the one that's like, yeah, you're doing what you did. Like obviously it's like you can look at it a certain way. Like if Dad's going to look at it a certain way. I can see it a certain way, so it's like it's not that out there to kind of like have this particular perspective on it. But at the same time, we also got answers to what I was wondering. I was like, there's no way Tobias doesn't have like a backup plan to make it so that the people, in particular Red, isn't immune to this emitter. And it's like, yeah, there's like a thing that kind of, he has some device ready to kind of counteract it. And so he has Red testing it out. And you even see the hesitation from Red. He's like, all right, oh cool, you stopped that bullet, cool. So it shows that it works. Now take the thing off. And he takes it off, and Red tries to stop the bullet, but the bullet goes past him. And it's like, come on, Red, I wasn't going to shoot you. It's like, he doesn't know that. It's like, he recognizes how much of a psychopath you are, that it's like, there's a chance that you would have shot him just for shits and giggles, because you are that type of dude. But it's like, also like, yeah, you owe me for this vase. It was very expensive. It's like, you're the one who, what? That's super messed up. And the thing is, like, you see Red's hand shaking because he seems so stoic all the time. He was legitimately scared because he was afraid, like, oh, like Tobias gets rid of people who are useless to him, and it's like, oh, like there's a chance he would have been like, I can always find a replacement. But it's like his very specific set of skills, There's a lot of interesting stuff. Obviously, Filk ends up helping TC like decipher like the files and everything. So we end up finding out that basically all this like helping cystic fibrosis at Monte Vista, it's like, nah, it's a front. Fact of the matter is, they're like trying to like, these are people who have the meta gene, and you're like, oh snap. So that's what this is about removing the meta gene from these people. And then you start seeing like Tobias's plan come into play. It's like, okay, because I was like, the emitter kind of gets rid of like metahumans. I was like, are you trying to get rid of like, obviously trying to control like the power vacuum? Because we see that step up this episode, because it's like, oh, he removes like, he's like basically taking over the Cobras from Destiny. And then also Ishmael is like, yeah, I'm paying him, so like now he's kind of moving on essentially to greener pastures, and now he's working for me. So, which I also love the whole thing of like, yeah, if Red can do that to your gun, what makes you think, what do you think he's going to do to you? It's like, I was about to say, it was like, to be fair, I mean, but Destiny doesn't know this. It's like powers against metal, but it's like, well, he could use metal to like crush her, and obviously we saw like the golf club and everything, so it's like, it could still be implemented like in other ways. But I was like, it's not like he has telekinesis or anything like that. He wouldn't be able to like crush her unless she had metal on or metal surround. Like I said, there's inventive ways to kind of deal with it, but Destiny and everything kind of goes like, it's like, well, that kind of went sideways. We also see now Tobias is the one with Lala as a statue, because I brought it up last episode, the last time we saw these circumstances, because Destiny had it and everything. It's like I immediately was like, oh yeah, it reminds me of like when Oswald had Ed in a block of ice at the Iceberg Lounge in Gotham. It kind of reminded me of that. I had brought that up previously, so even more so with now with Tobias, considering him and Lala's connection and stuff like that. So, oh, dude, it's going to be interesting to see. Like, so I was like wondering like what this Lala thing is. Like, there's enough time to like bring him back into the fold, like get him released and see what happens on that front. But going back to my point, like we now kind of understand a little bit more about what he's up to, because it's like, he's the one that controls the supply. First and foremost, it was like, okay, now you're the only one that has metas that they're kind of like on your security or your pay. You kind of dictate who gets to keep their powers and stuff like that. But then there's also the element of, right, now that you have the metahuman gene removed from people, you can sell it to the highest bidder. It's like, oh, who wants some meta genes? Here. And that's what I'm assuming that's supposed to be, of like applying like, trying to like make it so that people can just like, oh, probably like jack up and like get like the meta. I'm assuming it's like you're trying to control. I said that we're trying to control the supply of like metahuman powers. It seems like that's what you're doing. You're cultivating them and then like stacking them all up, and then you're planning on like doing a huge sale. I'm assuming, because you can like basically control, like make metahumans yours once again, because you have the technology to also make it so that they get to keep their powers. So I mean, that's my understanding of Tobias's plans. There's also the angle too that comes up in the conversation was like, yeah, is this emitter just in Freeland, or is it hitting the entire world? I'm assuming it's only powerful enough because like the emitter was initially meant to like give energy just to Freeland, but eventually they want to kind of expand upon it. But it's like, for now, it's just hitting Freeland. I was like, I don't think it's hitting Central City yet. I don't think it's covering the world. There was other elements too I was curious about too. I was like, how does this affect Khalil? He might not be in Freeland at the time of the emitter, so it might not. It's unclear like how certain people, like he is the thing is he was experimented on, so like his meta abilities are a little different. Like they are kind of meta abilities, but he's more of a science creation rather than a full blown meta, so it's a little differently. I mean, not a little differently. I said that weird too. Jesus, sorry. It's a little different, so. Which obviously we see him, we learned, I love that thing about Phil being like, wait, why are you freaking out in this, because I was like, oh, is the emitter having an effect on him? It's like, nah, he's like, I just don't like tight space. It's like, oh, really? And even Phil being like, yo, the world's most badass assassin, number one assassin is afraid of, like, is claustrophobic. He's like, nah, I just don't like tight spaces. It's like, yeah, some people might consider that claustrophobic, Which also begs the question, like, oh yeah, you're like an assassin. It's like, dude, I hope they do it. Ishmael versus Painkiller. Oh, dude, Painkiller's going to put your ass down. I think that's where we're going to go. I hope they do that. I hope they get the showdown, and it's like, Ishmael's got the technology and stuff like that, but Khalil's got the kills and the skills to kind of put him down. Once again, just like, they kind of do no holds barred, because to be fair, he's an anti-hero, so like, he's putting people down, like, whereas like, Jeff, Anissa, and Jennifer never, Anissa's killed people, yes, but I mean Jennifer's killed people, but it's a different circumstances. It's not nearly as bloody as like Khalil, because it's like, yeah, the moment like he's there trying to get the information, like the ledger he's supposed to be getting, like those guys come in there, one dude shot in the leg, takes the guy's gun to like shoot the other dude in the head, and it's like proceeds to beat the crap out of it. It's like a one-sided fight of like him easily beating everyone, and then that one last guy punching him in the face, and then he's bleeding, and then the blood is on the dude and ends up killing him. Like, oh, that's brutal. Oh, you poor bastard. And then, like, Painkiller gets the ledger, but I was like, oh, there's money in that safe. Are you gonna? Yeah, might as well, right? It's like, free cash here. Grab it and bounces, so. But looking through the file, they find, obviously they see some of the people on Tobias's payroll. Obviously we see Val, we see Red. But there was one person that was like, isn't that, and I could be mistaken, I was like, isn't that like, I'm blanking on her name. It's going to bother the crap out of me. I'm going to put it in the comments down below. Someone else might beat me to it, but that's okay. Isn't that the lady from season 2? She was like one of the like arcs in season 2 where like the whole thing, like, her people versus the party. Like, I don't remember, like her thing was like that basically she could possess and control people with like silver and stuff like that. I'm like, isn't that her, or am I confusing her with someone else? That looks like it's her, because I don't remember how that whole situation got resolved. Once again, that was like a season 2 storyline. If that's her, like I said, I could easily be wrong, and do correct me if I am wrong. But whoever, if whether that's her or not, whoever it is getting paid like $20,000. It's like, whoever you are, you're very important to Tobias. Like, what role you will play in all of this. Obviously, Phil and Khalil are looking into that, so that's going to be an interesting development to see what that's all about. Because if it is her from like season 2, I'm like, what role would she play in on? I mean, I guess it's like, maybe it helped, having people under your control, because she can control people, so maybe that plays a role. Like I said, if it's the same person, it looks like it is, but I could be 100% mistaken, because like I said, I don't remember how that situation with her resolved. I don't know whether she died or not. I thought she did. I thought somehow she died, but like I said, that's why I'm like, it might be a different character entirely, and I'm like I said, all this kind of means nothing, because I'm wrong about who it is, so either way, that's definitely going to be an interesting development. We also have the Gambi and Lauren confrontation. It's like, oh, like, I know that you stole from me. And he's like, right, like, give me time to explain. He's like, I can't explain right now. But it's like, for her, she was like, it's like, oh, like, I thought, like, what we had was real. But it's like, oh, no, you were just playing me so you could steal from me. It's like, well, first and foremost, it's like, he's going to have to, like, they have a sit down. I don't know if he explains, like, all right, the reason why I did this is because of the weapons you're doing. All right, I'm going to tell you a secret. I work with Black Lightning. It's someone very important to me. Like, you would have killed him and many other people with your weapons, so you were just kind of a little misguided in what you were kind of helping build. And he was like, I wasn't sure if I can trust you yet, but he kind of saw, like, she has a good nature, especially with the emitter and everything, of what she wanted to do. But it's like, you're also producing these weapons. There's also, like, the shady side of Monta Vista with all of these, like, metahuman like genes kind of getting removed from people, and it being like, oh, I actually, in the disguise of, oh, we're helping with cystic fibrosis and everything. So like, it's understandable why Gambi was like, hey, I'm not really sure you can be trusted. But it's like, also like, like I said, he seemed kind of like, she does, I think it's a thing of like, she just kind of like went about things in certain aspects the wrong way, but I think she does have a good heart in certain things. It's like, well, to be fair, it's not like you're the top dog. Even she has like a boss at Monta Vista, so I think that kind of plays a role in it. But, maybe she can be the one that kind of shift Monta Vista in a better direction. Now it's like, right, they end up kind of piecing everything together, because it's like, okay, how did this all happen? And so like Jeff, Lynn and Gambi are all there sitting down talking about this, and then that's when they start piecing together. The fact is, like, all the emitter, Val's power, like every one of them played a role in basically what ended up happening. Lynn being the one thinking she's helping find a cure for ALS, and it's like, oh, it was just a means of removing and basically helping like put Val's powers in a form that could ultimately lead to all of this. And obviously Gambi ended up helping with the emitter, and that led to this as well. So it's like everyone kind of played their own little role in just kind of like what's happening in Freeland. And it's like, now Tobias is literally the most powerful person in Freeland, and we see that he gets a visit from the Shadow Border, which is like, right, we never circled back around to that, did we? Because like Eve brought that up, I want to say last season, and we just never ever kind of really fully dived into that. But it's like, I don't know whether he actively was trying to get their attention, hence why he's doing all that he's doing. But they're like, oh, we're impressed with what you're doing. It's like, oh, the metahumans and everything. It's like, oh, you taking over Freeland is actually kind of a very essential part. The fact of the matter is, you also, we need you in the mayor position, because that way you can kind of be above board. Like, you can be doing your shady stuff, but we need you to be able to act in public as well. So the way Tobias acted at the end of it all, and they're like, close the box, and I think it made him feel small. Like, everything he's done is just to prove himself, to be like, oh, I'm top dog. But, to be frank, it feels like he was a little upset at the end, because it's like, right, no matter how powerful I feel and get, there's always going to be someone more powerful than me. It's kind of like, legitimately kind of felt like, he kind of felt like it felt like, at least to me, that he felt like he was kind of being punked. Like, he was just like, oh, like, he got like, it's like, oh, cool. Like, we kind of decide, like, we've been watching. It's like, yeah, you're good. Your efforts are good. Like, it's like he has to still prove himself. It's like, no matter how much he's top dog, at least wants to be, there's always going to be someone more powerful than him. So I think it's like, I think that kind of undercuts at least his accomplishments in his eyes. Like, once again, whether he's actively been trying to get the board's attention, like he set this up to get their attention and stuff like that, or whether this them actively being like, hey, we're impressed with what we've seen so far, so eventually you potentially could join our ranks, so we'll see how that kind of plays out. So there's that angle. There's also the conversation, where Jennifer is, adamant about getting her powers back, even to the point she's willing to electrocute herself to do it, freaking Anissa the hell out. But it's like, well, I needed to do this because for her, it's like, I've lost my identity as Jennifer. And like, you guys might all say like, oh, I'm the same Jen and stuff like that. But for her, it's like, I don't feel like it. I don't look like me. I'm a different person. She even has to live her life pretending to be someone else. She can't be Jennifer. She has to be JJ. And it's like, my powers were the only ties to who I used to be. Like, so for her, like, losing her powers is like losing the little bit of herself that was still there. And it's like, I need them to feel like me, And that's an interesting and complicated conversation because, it's so interesting because it ties into Lynn's, like, dream and stuff about, like, getting rid of her family's powers. It's like, that nightmare coming full circle like that in this regard. Or, like, you kind of inadvertently, that nightmare kind of came true that you were kind of your family's undoing because you kind of inadvertently helped take away their powers under these circumstances. But it's like, it's once again, it's that conversation she was having with her therapist of like, hey, maybe your dream's trying to tell you that your family isn't broken and they don't need you to fix them, that they're fine just the way they are. But that's the complicated conversation because obviously for Anissa, it's like, I don't want you to go into ionosphere again. It's like, we nearly lost you. What if we lost you again? But for her, it's like, I'm almost tapped out, so I won't be like overcharged like I was last time. It's like, I owe it to, Dad literally almost, sacrificed himself. He could have died trying to save me. It's like, I owe him, like, because if I can get my powers back, then maybe we can get jump starting a way to like fix this thing. Because I think Jennifer will be the key because with her power, if it's like, oh, like the moment she was like, yeah, Anissa was like, yeah, you knocked the power out in my place. I was like, that's going to be the thing. Like, Jennifer, like, it's like, well, we don't know what the emitter is. It's like, emitter is if she can, like, surge her power large enough, and this might turn into an issue later on, but if she can surge her power enough, it might be a thing that she can, like, knock out the emitter without them having to necessarily pinpoint where it is. Or maybe when they do eventually pinpoint it, she can... I wonder, could she end up jump-starting Jeff's power just because of the similarities to their powers to a certain extent? I'm wondering, could she... I don't know if Jeff could necessarily, like, jumpstart his. At the very least, she got a small amount of hers, but it's like going to the ionosphere let her kind of, like, fully absorb everything. Luckily, TC was able to kind of talk her down. It's like, so things didn't go sideways like last time, like, because Anissa is like, well, what more can I do? Like, because Jennifer's going to do Jennifer. Like, she's going to do it whether I approve of it or not, which obviously I don't. Because they, it's like, I nearly lost you before, sis. I ain't trying to lose you again, because there might not be any coming back from it. Yeah, you were lucky enough to come back maybe in a different form, but at the very least, you came back in general. You do this, there's no guarantee you're coming back, but she does, so she's got her powers and everything. But we see, like, when she left the ionosphere, she left a part of herself, like, some particles or stuff up there. So, my mind is like, oh, are we doing a Caitlyn and Frost thing, where it's like, JJ and Jennifer? So maybe, like, there's a part of Jennifer still, like, who she was as Jeff. Because, like, her mom noticed something, and she was calling Jeff, but she never said what it was. Like, she was like, it's nothing. But when she was looking at, like, comparing, like, Jennifer to JJ, it was like, there was something she noticed that we still haven't gotten answers to. It's from, like, a couple episodes ago. So, like I said, I'm wondering, are we actually going to have both Jennifer and JJ? Or maybe it's going to be a thing of they can get Jennifer back and maybe JJ ends up sacrificing her. I'm sure, hell, that's also, like, that could also tie into, like, Invincible, like, Episode 7. I'll leave it at that. Robot storyline. Like, what if we get something kind of similar to that? it could get depressing like that. Once again, you never know, like, because that's also a conversation too of like, yeah, like what if like this family's luck runs out and this being the final season and everything, like not everyone might come out of this alive. I think they will, but still, because it also ends on like an interesting conversation between Grace and Anissa, because Anissa's all about getting her powers back, but Grace isn't. Like, her powers are caused her nothing but like trouble her entire life, her upbringing and everything. So for her, it's like, I don't want this, and it's like, you guys are so keen to get your powers back, but she's like, for what? Like, it's done nothing but drag you guys into fight after fight. You guys have nearly been killed and kidnapped because of all of this. It's like, what good has your powers kind of brought you? And it's like, but that's also the thing, like, their powers, like, kind of like Jennifer, like, her powers are kind of like a little bit of her, like, it's like, oh, how I hold on to the, like, because your powers are a part of you. They, they've always kind of been there, whether they've been activated or not. It's always been a part of you. It's been a part of them for a while now. Especially in Jeff's case, it's like, and because that's always been a conversation with Lynn, because Lynn never really liked the Black Lightning side of things. But it's like, truth be told, is Black Lightning is just as much of like Jeff as any other superhero. Like, just as much as like for Oliver, Green Arrow was just as much as him as Oliver Queen was. For Barry, the Flash is just as much as who he is as Barry Allen. So it's like, it's a similar thing of like, it's a part of me. It's like asking me to deny a part of myself, And that's the same conversation for Anissa. It's like, you met me when I was a meta, you fell in love with me with a meta. So like, denying a part of myself, especially someone like Anissa who has always been like, that was a conversation, it's like, she's always been open with who she is. So like, kind of denying that meta side of herself would be the same thing. So like, for her, it's like, even if I have to like fight forever to get my powers back, I'm going to try and do that. So it's this complicated thing of, I mean, I think this is their first like argument as like, a married couple, as wives and everything. So it's like, and it's a complicated thing. So I'm assuming when it's all said and done, Grace isn't going to want her powers back, but she wouldn't want Anissa to have hers back either. She wouldn't want this entire family to have their powers back, because it's like, it causes nothing but trouble. So I'm sure Lynn kind of would lean more in that Grace thought process, kind of know she would. But I mean, that's the question, like, where Jeff would stand by. Like, would he want Jennifer and Anissa just to have normal lives? But also for him, it's a thing of, like, no, like, their powers are just as much a part of them as mine are mine. And it's like, I don't see Jeff giving up his powers, and we wouldn't want to, because it's like, I can do a lot of good. We can save people. That's also Anissa's, because Grace's point is, like, you don't have to bear the responsibility of Freeland, like, let Freeland take care of himself. But it's like, no, this is what our family does. We fight, we help, we save people, So it's an interesting and complicated question that kind of comes up in these type of things. Like, obviously, like, it comes up in X-Men about, like, it's like, well, would you want to keep your mutation as an X-Men, or would you want to get rid of, so that's always an interesting and complicated conversation. It's never like, you can see both sides of the argument. You can see Grace's side of things. You can see Anissa's side of things. And I'm curious to see where we kind of go with that in the final season and everything. So, like, how that all kind of shifts out, plays out. It's definitely going to be interesting in the long run. Like I said, a lot of interesting things to kind of keep in mind going forward. I'm curious to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.